the Heartway Pastor and Missionary Caregiver podcast. We are in episode 3 of season 5 on decision making. And today we're going to discuss boundaries as they relate to the process of making decisions. Before we get too deep into this, I want to emphasize that boundary setting is in fact biblical. When God gave the 10 Commandments, He in fact set boundaries. He set boundaries for the Israelites for their own good. For instance, think of the second command. You shall have no other gods before me. God knew that the Israelites served Him and desired to do so. In doing that, it is the opposite of serving God to put another God before Him. Doing this opposed their desire to worship the one and only true God. And it is in fact impossible to worship two gods if one of those gods is the true living God of the Bible, because He forbids it. And it wouldn't then, in that case, be worship. Also, God gave the boundary of the Sabbath for our own good, to be able to continue living and serving God well and for longer. He knows we need to rest, physically, mentally, emotionally. When we break that boundary, that affects our ability to be able to continue living and serving God well. Here recently, my wife had COVID, and that made our past week really busy, much busier than normal for me. And so today I took an off day, because last week I was unable to get a restful Sabbath in, and so I took today off, and we spent the day at Texas State Park, and that is very refreshing and needed to be able to keep on keeping on well, following God, serving God, and being the leader I need to be in my family and in my ministry and in the church setting I'm in. In decision making, we have not only these boundaries given directly to us in the Bible with the 10 Commandments, but we have God and His leading and will for us to serve Him in specific ways. This helps us in making the big decisions, then the smaller decisions, then making necessary steps in the right direction. But when we don't have boundaries, or we don't keep our boundaries, which is more of the issue, this can disrupt us in being able to serve and follow God as well. Henry Cloud and John Townsend point out in an article called Setting Healthy Boundaries that boundaries preserve the freedom to choose God's path. We can only truly love God and others when we are free. We are free to move away from God as well as toward Him. Boundaries give us freedom, but we need to use our freedom to look forward to the path He has for us, instead of back at the old ways. So if you say, yes, I will help you with that event tomorrow evening, you are saying no to something else. You are removing the freedom you have for tomorrow evening, which is fine if that event falls in line with everything else, right? With God's main plan for you, with whatever big decisions you have made, and then this would be probably like a smaller decision, most likely. So it should fall in line with that big decision, which falls in line with the God's plan that He has for you. So let's say you are invited to join in a community event that could allow you to form better connections with people in your community and be a witness in your community as the pastor God has called you to be. Then saying yes to that event may be okay. But why just maybe? Well, what if you had previous obligations? Or maybe you told your children or wife that you would do XYZ with them tomorrow evening, And then you have effectively not only said no to maybe either of these previous obligations, but maybe also to your wife or children. And in this case, you also lied to them, and you messed up prioritizing by putting others before your wife and children. As a father, as a Christian, as a husband, you have the biblical call to prioritize your life as God has laid out, in addition to fathering your children and being a good husband to your wife. This decision would have jacked up all that, right? So I think there's a previous podcast episode that you can listen to on priorities that I would encourage you to look for and find in our previous episodes. Let's slightly change this scenario. What if the event tomorrow was seeing your really good friend, maybe your best friend, in the hospital, who had just been in a bad car wreck? Well, this changes things. Stephen Covey, in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, gives us the Covey time management matrix. This helps clarify what to do when there's still conflicting opportunities, when following the biblical model of prioritizing. So when there's conflicts, when you follow like God, and then spouse, and then family, and then other people, and then basically career and everything else, there's sometimes still conflicts in that, and it's not clear what direction to go, what decision to make. Well, in the previous episode that I did on priorities, I didn't address urgency. This matrix addresses urgency and priorities. Sometimes urgent situations arise that are important. For instance, if you don't go to the office today to turn in your paperwork for visa extensions, you missionaries out there, right? And maybe you have to leave the country God has called you to serve in. And this trumps everything for the day in decision making. But what about if you knew for months about this need and just procrastinated? In this case, you have not handled the case well. Any previous commitments you have let down, you have in that situation, you've let down those individuals and poorly represented Christ, honestly, and how you dealt with that situation. So I would encourage you to look up the Covey time management matrix in Google, because it is a visual model, and it's best to look at it visually to help in prioritizing and boundary setting. Back to the idea we presented earlier, that boundaries preserve the freedom to choose God's path. Boundaries are vital in decision making. They help keep us from overcommitting and committing to things that just aren't important, like the time we spend on social media, right? There can be benefits to that, but a lot of times we can overcommit to that time or spend too much time doing that when it doesn't fit into the other decisions we've made or the steps to follow in that decision making. So how can boundaries be helpful then, and keep you from choosing to follow God to a specific mission field, for instance? So in this case, a boundary is like a protection that you would have in place, realizing that you're not maybe where God would have you to be, doing what God would want you to be. You're searching, you're praying, you're kind of in this unknown state, and that's a difficult state to be in. We're gonna have a future episode in this season, and this transitional state in decision making. But when you're in that state and you don't know God's plan, there's certain boundaries you can set up to keep you free in being able to follow God's plan when he does reveal them. And one of those is doing something like not buying a house, not settling down. Maybe if you're, just looking at a period of a few months or something, and you're just in that great unknown, don't get tied down in that way. That might be a boundary that could be helpful. One that's always helpful is, in this case, not getting into debt, and being really mindful of your spending and budgeting, and that includes student loans. Like if you have the opportunity to get more education that might be helpful to you, try to do that debt-free. That would be the most ideal, and it will keep you free then, right? You won't be a slave to that lender, but you'll be free to follow God where he sends you. And how can boundaries help you choose to follow God to a specific mission field? Like in this way, and I've seen this even for people who aren't in ministry, for people who don't go on the mission field, but they get stuck at a job because they get tied into this employer health insurance. And basically they can't do anything else. They can't switch jobs. They can't go anywhere else. Because they've gotten in a situation, a predicament where they're really dependent on this employer health insurance. And, I understand sometimes things happen and they're out of your control, but if you can at all operate without getting tied into that and bound into that, where you lose the freedom to go anywhere and everywhere and do anything that God would potentially call you to do. If that's not clear yet, then I would recommend it. There are different Christian healthcare sharing ministries out there that are affordable, that are, in my opinion, just as good, if not better, than health insurance. And I just went through that process a couple months ago, so I can tell you in the most up-to-date manner that I went through a ton of health insurance plans and decided, and in my case, Samaritan Ministries was the best fit. And so you may think that's crazy, not from what I've seen, and we've had it for a long time and continue to use it. And it keeps us free to move around and do different things. Also, a helpful boundary that you can set in place. So if you know, like, you need certain medical treatment and certain prescriptions for whatever health conditions you have, setting up a boundary to know, like, hey, this isn't realistic for me to go to an area that won't allow me to have this treatment or access to these prescriptions. So being, mindful of that early on and setting that boundary so you don't end up in a place and you realize, oh, other than the medicine I brought with me, it's not really plausible for me to keep getting this medicine or to get this treatment here like I thought it would be. So this is helpful. Also, another boundary, if you have a family, I think we mentioned this before. If your family is wanting to homeschool and feels like that's the calling and that fits into a bigger decision, and then you're looking for within that, like, where God is sending you, and they don't have that as an option, and maybe it's even necessary for your family to homeschool because of learning disorders or anything like that, then that could be helpful in choosing a place to, or knowing what place God might be sending you guys to or not sending you to. So there's a lot of different boundaries that maybe you could think of that you could set in place that would keep you free to be able to follow God to the mission field and to choose the right mission field. So those are just things to dwell on for you missionaries out there, or you Christians that are out there listening that think maybe God might send me to serve one day somewhere. Boundaries are super helpful and absolutely necessary in that. Boundaries are so freeing, even though that may seem counterintuitive, right? To bound something, and in that bounding there is freedom. But this is so true, even for children. Think about it. They need help setting boundaries so they can enjoy their childhood ultimately. A child without help setting boundaries would be maybe addicted to technology, and maybe they could make some terrible life-altering mistakes, right? Like if you don't have a boundary of, you need to be back home by this certain time, or you don't have a boundary saying that, before you go into someone's house, you need to speak with me, the parent, beforehand. This could get them into some really, really messy situations. And so children need help setting boundaries. A child that has help setting boundaries has the freedom to then play safely and eventually has more choices in what to do with their life because they've avoided life-altering mistakes. Now, I just want to put a little disclaimer on this because we live in a time and an age now where sometimes I feel like the boundaries are a little bit overkill, and we've kind of robbed children of their childhood by just we just have this false reality that keeping them in their homes and not letting them out will keep them safe. And so there is, a balance in it all. But think about it, if we had that perspective as adults, we need to stay in our homes, and that's really the only safe place there is. We're not doing the Great Commission. We're not keeping the first two commandments. We're not loving God and loving others. We're not making disciples. We're not doing the things we should be doing as Christians. And that's something to think about because we need to be training our kids to do that too. How can they be a light to other children for Christ if they're stuck in their homes and unable to get out? How can they learn to do certain things and learn how to set certain safeguards and be wary of people, learn what people to be wary of and not be wary of without us giving them help setting boundaries, but also them having the freedom to some degree to explore. That was just a little side note, but just like a parent with their children, so is God with us, His children. He helps us to set boundaries using His word, right? His leading through the Holy Spirit, right, for those of us who are saved, and His plans for us, which He has written before we were even born. He does this so as to help us not make life-altering mistakes. And when we make decisions within His boundaries, we have freedom to follow His word and His leading through the Spirit and His plans for us. So that freedom that we have is because of the boundaries and because of God's love for us, and He directs us in setting boundaries, and even sets a lot of boundaries for us. There's a lot of things He tells us to avoid and to not do, and this is for our own good because He loves us. I hope that you take some time and reflect on your boundaries. I'm not going to tell you what boundaries to set up. This is just an episode to help you to think through setting boundaries and to think on what boundaries do you need to put in place to help you make decisions that are God-honoring. And I really want you to dwell on that for a bit. Dwell on the boundaries you need to set up for God's plans in your life, to be able to follow Him, do what He wants you to do, where He wants you to do it, when He wants you to do it. In terms of yourself and being able to serve God well and to be the parent you need to be, or to be the relative you need to be the spouse you need to be the friend you need to be the employee or the employer that you need to be the church member you need to be. What boundaries do you need to put in place? What boundaries? Think on that, reflect on that, and start putting it into practice. If you mess up from time to time, don't give up. Heard one time, try not to miss twice in a row. If you miss once, if you mess up on a boundary once, just the next time, try to follow through and try not to miss twice. And I thought that was a good point where we don't get overly discouraged when we do mess up, and we don't give up and go into this great downfall, but we keep on keeping on. And that's what it's all about, right? In our life, that we keep pursuing Christ, growing closer to Him, and don't give up. We just keep on doing that. And I hope this podcast has been encouraging and helpful to you for that, for your spiritual life, for your journey in following Christ. And I look forward to the next time, the next episode. Until that time, this has been the Heartway Podcast, where we seek to help with issues at the source.